You are on Startup Club, and this is the show that we run every Friday, 2 o'clock Eastern, called the Serial Entrepreneur Club Hour. And today we're talking all about how to make your team productive, how to motivate, how to hire, how to keep employees, how to get more out of employees. It's a challenging thing. We are in a very difficult time when it comes to hiring employees for startups. If you are a big corporation, you have the budget, not so tough, is it? But if you're a startup, it's a little bit tricky to hire, motivate, and keep employees in today's environments. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Colin. How are you?
Very good. And I know you're recovering from COVID, so congratulations for joining the club and surviving.
It
Um,
finally caught me
but
after several years of avoiding it.
finally did, right? All right. So we're just kicking it off right now. And I just was reading the Wall Street Journal this morning, Jeff and Mimi, and I just wanted to read a little bit of that. The companies have been laser focused on filling job vacancies for most of the past year. They've raised wages, they've lowered barriers such as experience requirements, and retooled hiring to make on-the-spot offers as an effort to reduce shortages that keep them from filling orders and keeping customers happy. Now, these efforts have helped the US economy. We're back to pre-pandemic levels. The unemployment rate was 3.5%. I know this morning they announced it went up to 3.7%. But the fact remains that we have a very tight labor market. And it's very difficult for startups in this environment to find employees, to motivate them, and to keep them. Michelle, I know you had a few thoughts on this one, but before we jump to you, Michelle, if you think this is a topic of interest and you're on stage or you're in the audience, I'm going to ask that you share the room. There's a button right on the bottom left corner, not the far left, there's one on the second left, and I'm doing it right now. And just simply click on share on Clubhouse. And because I think this is a topic that a lot of startups could really use help with. How can we create productive environments in our workplace, Michelle?
I love this topic, and I think it's great. Here we are on the eve of Labor Day, but it's always applicable. So I'm going to jump right in. I have a whole list of them. I'm sure our members in the audience have a lot to say about this as well. So I'm going to throw out my first one. And I think this could be, there's a lot of debate about this recently. And I listen, for example, to CNBC every morning, and I can't believe how much this is debated. And it's all around keeping connected. And why I'm saying it's a little controversial now is because people are really struggling post pandemic about the whole issue of connectivity. Like, do you need to be there in person? Can you do it remotely? Is it a hybrid? I just hear from these top companies now when I listen to the news, they're really, really struggling with it. For us and our teams, what we have found is that if our managers and all of the staff, have built relationships, which, in my humble opinion, requires people interacting with each other in an authentic way, then you do have connectivity. So, the first hack I'm going to say is keep connected. And I personally, from my experience, believe that you do not need to be in the office all the time. One thing that we did on our team during COVID, and we were actually in the middle of a big transaction too. We were actually selling .club domains to GoDaddy at this time. Is we did daily stand-ups, daily huddles, and we did them via Zoom. The overwhelming feedback from the team was that they highly appreciated it. We have a very remote team, in the US and abroad, and they felt like it helped them get focus and not lose connection. So I'm going to go with something that is not so easy these days, perhaps, in terms of how to do it effectively, but it's keep connected. And I mean on all levels. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, Michelle, if I could just add to that as someone who participated in those huddles with you too, and we still do daily huddles at companies I'm involved in, like paw.com, in different departments. But I think to really stay connected to and to help build that team feeling and that team culture, it's important that when you have these daily huddles that you have space for personal items too, not just all business, especially when you're dealing with people remotely, because when employees are remote, it's hard to get that, you know, gathering around the water cooler culture where you get to know your co-workers. And some people now can work for years for a company and never actually meet their co-workers in person. So it's important that you have time in these huddles to share. We typically start, especially coming in on a Monday after the weekend, everyone tells a little bit, something personal that you accomplished or that happened or that went well for you over the weekend, so that we get to know each other personally. So right now, people are going back to school, so many people on the team who happen to be parents, they've been sharing stories about their kids' first day of school or whatever may be going on in their lives. And it's important to not just connect on a business level, but to also connect on a personal level.
Yeah, I think that it's difficult for startups. I mean, in this environment where we have such a low unemployment rates, you have inflation. I mean, I've been hearing, hiring new people, the rates are going up 10, 15, 20%. It's very difficult for startups. And if you're in the audience and you have an idea, you have a concept, or you have something you'd like to share with us, please raise your hand. It's Friday afternoon. We're here to have some fun conversation and talk about how we can really attract, motivate, and keep employees. That's what it's all about. I often use the line, for startups, pay your people with love, ownership, and freedom. And what do I mean by that? Well, love, I mean really respect and recognition, and really thinking about supporting the people around you, the people within your organization. We often talk about people are our number one asset. Well, the fact of the matter is that's true. Without people, without the employees, we don't have a startup. So one of the things we can do, and it doesn't cost us a lot of money, is simply recognize the contributions that they're making in the startup and give them credit for those contributions within the company and outside the company. The second thing I talk about is ownership. And what I mean by that is simply total transparency on the numbers and sharing with your team the profits and the successes, whether it's bonuses, whether it's actual ownership through stock options, which I like to use with all of our startups, or whether it's simply a annual plan. Consider sharing those successes and sharing the benefit of those successes with your team. And lastly, freedom. We saw this take off after the pandemic, where, during the pandemic, everybody was given a lot of freedom, or they just weren't going to work for the company anymore. And in fact, today, I think about 40% of offices are still empty, and there's a lot of flexibility in the market. But as a startup, when you're competing with a Fortune 1000 company who's also now offering that flexibility, it becomes a little bit more challenging. So we want to think of ways or things that we can do to provide that. Maybe it's different hours, or maybe it's certain time of the year off. We really want to try to understand our from our staff exactly what their needs are in life outside of work, so that we can fit the work into their life versus the reverse, which is sticking their life into our work. And that is so, 1990s, 2000, and 2010s, not 22 anymore, 2200. Any other thoughts on the stage here? And we're waiting for some people to come up again. If you have a thought about how to attract, motivate, or keep employees, please raise your hand and we'd be happy to have you up here.
I have one about meetings. I think what Michelle said, checking in and just like keeping connected, is definitely really important across teams. But this has just been like fresh on my mind since we talked about it on the Complete Entrepreneur last week. Keeping meetings really like efficient and exciting and only down to the people that need to be there.
Isn't it so true that, so many people who, when they go to work, if they feel like they're wasting time, they're not productive, they're not creating things, that they get frustrated with the company, they get frustrated with the startup and decide to go do something else. So we want to value their time when they're in the office or when they're working for us. And I think meeting efficiency is something that is key as well. Jeff or Michelle, do we have another tip or trick?
Well,
Hack or
something that can be done is gamification. Like make aspects of work a little bit more fun and gamify them. It's something we did back when I worked at a company called Mixer. We did this, and it was really effective to bring all the different departments together. And I think you can do the same thing even with remote teams. But we had a company-wide internal hackathon with prizes and stuff where everyone in the company, no matter what role they were in, from the developers to the bookkeepers to the marketing team, everyone in the company was invited to participate in a hackathon. And it didn't have to be coding necessarily, but coming up with some idea of how to do something that was related to the company's business in an unusual way. So it could have been creating a new app, it could have been just anything, and it was a company-wide competition. And it was just a lot of fun, and it also served for people to meet people in different departments because everyone had to present their ideas at the end of the hackathon. And it was a great way for the company to get actual ideas of new ways to go about business that might have come from someone that you wouldn't expect a new business idea to come from. And I remember this was a company that did ringtones, and my contribution to the hackathon was an idea with Twitter, because it was the early days of Twitter and I was very active on it back then. And it was to do a ringtone of the day delivered by Twitter, called it Tweet Tones. I still own the domain tweettones.com. But that was kind of fun, and I actually was one of the winners of the hackathon with that idea. And it didn't require me to have any programming skills, it was just a fun idea. But some kind of a hackathon, an internal hackathon to generate ideas around your business, is kind of a fun way to bring teams together, to create some creativity across the organization. And I think that's something that more companies should do. And I look back on that experience very fondly from my Mixer days.
it's interesting, this idea of having some fun with your employees. I remember we had booked a movie theater. A few times I've done that with the team, different companies. We book a movie theater and we all go and watch a movie, during work hours. And, that was a lot of fun, but even cocktail hours or other social events, picnics. Geez, we haven't done a picnic at Startup.club yet. That'd be fun to do is, get all the families together and you go to a park and you do something, have a little event. And it's just really nice to do those kind of things and learn how to bond outside of work, because I think the more that everyone bonds with each other, the better they'll work together. But at the same time, they're less likely to leave because they would be leaving their community. So I think that in itself could be a hack or a technique to help support attracting, motivating, and keeping employees. Brandon, you're on stage. It looks like you're pretty new to Clubhouse. But did you have a thought or an idea of how we can motivate employees? The microphone's bottom right corner. And if you're not ready yet, we can jump to Reham. Did I pronounce that right, Reham? Again, I know you're new. We have a lot of new people on the app today.
Hello,
Hello, Reham. Have you got a
how
thought
are
about this
you?
topic?
Oh, what?
All right, we're having some, maybe you can find a better location for the Wi-Fi, but we're having some issues hearing you.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi work on.
All right, so sorry, we're gonna jump down to Cletus. I'm horrible with names. Another another new person on the app today, Cletus. Cletus. All right, I mean we're all there. You go,
Yeah, while
Michelle.
we're
Go ahead.
waiting, I'm going to throw something else out there. I love to drop these bombs. I personally, what I find to be horribly bad in a company, meaning a productivity killer, is when you have managers and bosses that are just extremely negative or not supportive or even unqualified. So I would say that culture really has to start from the top. And I've always said for myself personally in my career, sometimes for me, like most of the time, it doesn't really matter what the company is I'm working for. What matters to me is who I'm working with. Like, I spend a lot of time working. I care greatly about my work style, about my work environment. So it is absolutely critically important to me that I am working with the right group of people. So that means that we're supportive of each other, that we're helping each other grow, and that it's friendly. And it's, that for me is paramount.
Let me ask you a question, Michelle. With respect to spending, social time with your staff or extracurricular activities, really getting to know them, becoming friends with them. Do you think that's a good idea for a startup, or could it backfire?
Yeah, I think it could, just like anything else, it could backfire. I think you have to be professional, of course, but I've always found that it's a good thing as long as people, understand everyone in the picture, managers and staff, what proper professional boundaries are. I find that if you can establish these relationships, that it oftentimes makes a safer environment to have these kind of brainstorming meetings. Or, my gosh, when you hit like an issue, if I feel like, okay, we have respect for each other and we are friends, right? I didn't say family, but we're friends. I can walk into the room and go, oh my gosh, everyone, like, I'm like, can't believe I did this. We have like a huge issue. And everybody just comes together. To me, that's part of the manifestation of having that trustworthy and environment where we are friends. So for me, it's good. And I find that if, it does happen occasionally that people start to step over those boundaries, they have to be equipped to handle that. So I would vote for yes, it's good to be friends. Thank you.
Yeah, I think especially in a startup with just such a small environment, it's very intimate. It's hard not to be friends. I mean, we've become friends. Jeff, Michelle, and myself have become pretty close friends over the years. We now work with multiple different startups here in the incubator. But the fact of the matter is, it becomes pretty difficult. But then ultimately, there'll come a time when you need to make a tough decision, and I think for the most part, you know, people who are your friends will understand that you had to make those decisions. But it can be a little tricky emotionally. Reham, do you have better Wi-Fi? You want to give that another try? Or Cletus or Brandon, if any of the three of you can get off of mute, we'd love to hear from you. Yeah, I don't know what's going on today, Michelle. We might have some bugs on the app,
I think
right?
so.
But
All
it's
right,
nice
let's
to.
go to Jeff. I know Jeff has a lot of experience here.
Well, I've shared a few tips, and I think, related, the one thing about the hackathon idea, Colin, versus just having fun is it's fun, but it also reinforces the objectives of the company. It gives everyone in the company a chance to think about the product or the service you have because they're trying to come up with an idea around that. And similar to that, I think an important thing for companies to do to build culture and really get a
Hello.
cohesive team
Okay, good. I'm
is,
on.
okay, one moment. Let me just finish what I was saying. Is to eat your own dog food, as the saying goes, but make sure that everyone throughout the company has access to and experience with your product. Oftentimes in a startup, the founders and the programmers are using the app, but maybe not everyone in the company is actually using it. So if your product is software or an app or a physical product, I think it's important to make sure that everyone on the team, especially now if you have remote employees, they actually have a sample of your product. They've actually used it, touched it, felt it, can understand it from the point of view of a customer. And that's important for everyone in the company, whether they're an executive or an intern, they should have hands-on experience with your product or service. I think that's really important, and sometimes it's overlooked.
Yeah, it's interesting with respect to my vacation rental business. The administrator who works here at the incubator with us, I offered him a week trip, fully paid, to go to one of our vacation rental locations. And he seemed pretty excited about that. And I also think by doing that, by eating your own dog food, as you say, Jeff, they're actually going to learn the business better. They're actually going to understand it. I know with respect to Mimi, we've said she can open as many rooms as she wants on Clubhouse. She does a phenomenal job with respect to the blogs and putting together content on the website at startup.club. If you haven't already seen it, do check it out. She really is a rock star, and we really appreciate everything you're doing, Mimi. But I was joking about the opening your own room. We got to get you to one of the vacation rentals as well. Brandon, it seems like you've got your audio worked out.
Yes, 100%. Colin, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm tuning in from South Africa all the way. Unfortunately, I cannot mention the company that I want to bring in, but as just adding my little 1% into this whole topic that we're busy on, is just to say that you have a lot of people that are joining in and in companies, and the culture, it's been running for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, and how do that new employees fit into the culture. And sometimes you're hiring people that are entrepreneurs, you're hiring people that are they actually just joining because they need a salary, they're just joining because whatever it is. But sometimes you have to understand, as a hiring manager, that you're hiring people that has a lot of talent, that has a lot of potential, and you need to allow them, their day-to-day responsibilities, whatever they have. But you have to understand that, beyond that, they are also experienced. They have a lot of potential, and they can not only just contribute on the team, but also there's a lot of other things that they have that they can possibly contribute. And you need to allow that, to shine, to grow. You need to be able to be a mentor, to be able to grow them. Yeah, a lot of people doesn't have that capabilities to grow them, because I hired you for a specific thing and you have to do a specific thing. But you have to understand that a lot of people that are joining the company, they have potential, they have a lot of talents they are joining on, and the day to day they have to do that. But also being a mentor and allowing them to grow. If they are better than you have to allow them to be better than to a certain extent. If they're going to be starting a startup after 5, 4 years, 3 years, you need to allow them, to grow, and possibly see them, being better than what you are. So that's my point that I can possibly bring in. You have a lot of people that are joining into cultures that are already been formed, but you have to understand you're hiring people that are you have a lot of talents. They have a lot of potential. There's a lot of other avenues that they can possibly think. And some managers, they are not groomed into that position to grow them or to mentor them. So you have to allow that space to say, I'm hiring someone that can possibly be better than what I am, and I have to make room for this person to grow.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I remember reading some studies that talked about almost half of people will leave their company because they don't like working for the person they're working for, and they're not getting the recognition they deserve. And I've also seen half the people will leave the company um, not because of wages was up there. It's like number three or something like that in the study, number three or four, but also because they're not developing. And personal development is so key for everyone. To go to a work environment and you're doing something and you're not improving yourself, you're not building upon yourself, you know, that means you're stagnating. The more that you can
100%.
improve yourself, right? The more you can improve yourself, the more you can become better and better and better at what you do, the more money you're going to command in the workplace. So the one thing that we can do as startups is, and we can do this better than big corporations. I'll explain why in a second. But the one thing we can do is really empower our employees, really give them a
100%.
lot of responsibilities, right, Brandon? Like a lot of responsibilities, because by doing that,
100%.
they can learn so much. And if you're at the big corporation, you're at a big company, and you're in charge of payables, You might be doing the exact same thing over and over and over again. In order for you to get the exposure where you're doing payables, receivables, depreciation, all that kind of stuff, you almost have to work for a startup. You have to work for a small company. Yeah, Brandon, any thoughts?
100%, Colin. You're 100% right.
No, that's awesome. So, Michelle?
Yeah, I'm just going to add a little bit to that. I think sometimes it's an individual thing, quite honestly, Colin. I think you should have a conversation with the person, right? Like some people want to be like deep subject matter experts, and some people want to be broader. But I do think, there's a lot that goes on, obviously, in reviews. But in my opinion, one of the key things should be a conversation about what they want to do and how they think they can better contribute so that we as managers can help support that. Sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I have the perfect job and I just want to like keep doing it forever. There are scenarios like that. And then there are other people that are just like, I really want to try something different, or I want to go over to this new project. I need something new. So really listen. I'm going to add to your employees in terms of what they feel and what they know is good for themselves. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually don't think that employee reviews are very effective. In fact, I think they're negative, and I think they harm the productivity in your company, and that might be controversial. This is not to say we don't want to understand the needs of our employees and also understand how we can help them develop. We want to do that. We totally want to do that. But have you ever talked to an employee who's going to a performance review or who's been at a performance review and then say, you know what, I really feel much better about this company? No, it's to me, and I know this is controversial and this is, not something that business books talk about a lot, but I think performance reviews are bad for morale. Michelle, I know you want to argue that.
Yeah, no, I didn't argue. I said that they should be about how can you help them move forward and build their career. Is the best performance reviews I have had were not negative at all, and it was very much about how can I help you grow your career. And that's an important conversation. It's important for the manager to know that so they can support them.
Yeah, and we're hitting the halfway mark here, and we're going to reset the room. You're listening to the Serial Entrepreneur Club with Jeffrey Sass, Michelle Van Tilburg, and myself, Colin C. Campbell. And we're talking today about really how to keep, motivate, and uh, attract top talent for your startup. And if you have an idea in the audience around how to do that, how to, for instance, you might have a unique way of recognizing employees for their achievements, or you have something unique that you can share with the community, please raise your hand. It's Friday afternoon, and we're here to, keep this open mic. Thank you, Brandon from South Africa, coming on. I don't know, is that your first time talking on stage, Brandon? Because I just followed you as well, so you got one follower there, but. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say one other, well, two things. So one, in terms of supporting personal growth of your employees, many companies have um, educational and self-improvement policies. I was just talking to someone actually who both Michelle and Colin, I won't mention names because I don't want to talk about the company specifically, but he just started a new job with a company. And he was commenting to me the other day that this particular company has a real focus on education as part of their company culture. And as such, any employee is actually eligible to continue their education with support from the company. So this person who had never really thought about getting an advanced degree or an MBA or something like that, now is actually considering getting an MBA, part-time, obviously in evenings, but with the complete support, not only and financial support from this company. And that all came about because that is the company culture. They want everyone in the company to further themselves educationally, because they believe then they'll be better performers and they'll do better and they'll come back from that education with new skills and new things that they can bring to the table to the benefit of the company. So you can have a culture of self-improvement, a culture of education, where it's more than the culture, where you actually have policies that support continued education and things like that for your employees. So that's certainly one way to approach that.
No, I think it's great. I see at paw.com you often have a speaker come in, I think once a month on a particular topic, and I think that's a smart idea as well.
Yeah.
Cletus, I know you've been trying to get your microphone to work here. We want to hear
Yeah,
from you.
yeah, yeah, I'm back on now. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking from Nigeria and it's my first time speaking here. So I just wanted to point out that in an organization, communication is really, really key. And basically, what we've been talking about or centering on around here is communication. I worked somewhere in Nigeria where there wasn't a good communication basis and we lacked some basic amenities to work well in the workplace, but then we didn't have the opportunity to speak, or we didn't have the line of connection to go to the right place, to speak to our boss or whoever was in charge of us at that time. So for me, I believe communication is really key in the workplace to, help boost the employees' minds to grow.
So, Cletus, is it Cletus or Cletus?
Cletus.
Cletus. So
Yeah.
it just amazes me how many startups
Yeah.
who have such few employees have an issue with communication. And it isn't the fact that they can't communicate with each other because they're sitting in the same office, or they can pick up the phone or get on Zoom or WhatsApp. It's really about creating an environment that everyone could be comfortable in to
Exactly.
communicate, but communicate not only the positive things, right?
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
also the
Yeah.
negative things without recourse,
Yeah.
right? To say to startup, and let's be quite frank, a lot of
Mhm.
entrepreneurs have a little bit of an ego, and
Yeah.
sometimes we can be a little bit type A and a little bit not easy to get along with. And so when you say
Exactly.
to entrepreneurs, you say, hey, this is wrong, you should be doing this, they can sometimes become defensive. And I
Exactly.
think if we can acknowledge that as entrepreneurs and a startup, to create that safe environment and improve the communication, I think you're onto something there. And great job for a first time on stage, by the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All
And I'm
right.
still on. Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, still on communication about negative and positive communication. I think working in a communicative environment, I think both parties, both the listening and the speaking party, must understand that they must try to pass on their information in the right manner so as not to offend or sound offensive. I think you made a point with when you were speaking about positive and negative communication.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
hard. It's
natural
not
for us,
natural.
right?
Yeah, it really is not natural, but we just have to try and work on that as employees and bosses as well.
Yeah, you gave me an idea, Cletus. It's almost like there could be somebody in our companies that help our employees have those different, difficult communications with people. Like, wouldn't that be awesome if you had somebody you could go to and just talk to very candidly, directly, without judgment, to help you
Yeah,
navigate and communicate in those situations? Like,
yeah,
for me, I just think that's like an invaluable throughout your whole entire life skill
exactly.
set.
Yeah, that will be really, really awesome because being able to express how you feel at the workplace will be able to push you to work the more because when you make your feelings or your emotions or whatever you go through in the workplace known and it is being addressed swiftly, that would be a great plus to the employees. How do I put this now? Mindset towards the work. So another thing when it comes to communication is swift response and swift reaction to those communication. Because if there is a communication line without swift reaction, and swift response, then I don't think that kind of communication is going to work, because the basis of communication is the message, and a feedback to the message, and as well a reaction to the message.
Yeah, well, it's a balance, right? We have to be
Yeah.
direct, and at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we're dealing with, everyone's human, right? And we
Yeah.
can't necessarily, we have to be somewhat positive. I call it the velvet hammer. If you have to deliver
Mm,
some negative news, it's like, okay, we'll do it, but we'll do it really nicely. Um,
yeah.
well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your thoughts there on
Thank
stage.
you.
And we have Leticia. Again, pronunciation I need help
Okay,
with,
it's
okay?
no, you're fine. It's Leticia. It's yeah.
Leticia.
Yep. How are you guys? It's so good to be here. I agree with all of you. You guys have some amazing nuggets, and I just wanted to mention, going with the title. I think the number one thing, being a serial entrepreneur, is to show appreciation, being humble, and having a great attitude towards everything. And you mentioned about entrepreneurs sometimes can have those egos, and that will hurt you in the long run. But if you appreciate your staff and you show that to them, uh, half the time, I wouldn't say half the time, but they'll be willing to work for free if you were to hit a hard rock, because you're really passionate about what you do, and you show them, that you truly care, not only for them bringing their expertise to the table, but outside, like you were saying, getting to know them, knowing who labors among you. The picnic was a phenomenal idea. Now I have rented out movie theaters, especially when COVID came. And it will just be us, and it was a time to bond, to get to know families, and it was very personal. And I think that is key, because everybody is dealing with something before they walk into that threshold. They're dealing with something, and especially during that time of COVID. um, so showing appreciation, being humble, and I agree to the communication. I'm very, very big on communication, between having that continuity between the team, because if you don't, we fail. Our balls are being dropped. So I'm very big on communication, and I believe in having borders, and barriers up to where, you're not allowed to cross and your staff is not allowed to cross, but yet you can have that mutual feeling in the workplace, as a team, and to create that culture. So I really appreciate you guys, just putting these nuggets out there. I wish a lot of people, and what forced me to step out on faith and become this serial entrepreneur now, is because I have worked with, um bosses who, they just wasn't relatable, and they didn't care if your child was sick. They didn't care, at some point. Yeah, you do have to have that balance, but life happens outside of the workplace. So if you just stay humble, show your team that you appreciate them, they will come to bat for you. If you were to get in on hard rock, I can speak to it for myself. Starting up companies, we didn't always have the fun. I just knew I had an idea and a dream. And with that, people would bring me or give me their expertise and link me to, people that had the keys that I needed, just because of my humble spirit, and, just showing appreciation. So I appreciate this topic today, and I rest my mic.
So Leticia, humble and entrepreneur, it's like oil and vinegar. Am I wrong? Like, is it?
It can
It's not
be.
natural though, is it? It's not natural. I mean, if you think about, all of the, billionaires from, Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, humble is not something, you know, you could even throw Donald Trump in this list. I mean, humble is not something you think about when you think of these entrepreneurs. And yet you're saying be humble is a trait that can help increase productivity, and people would actually work for you for almost nothing if you needed it, if you're humble. And it's just, I want your thoughts on that first, Letitia, and just,
Absolutely. And to your point, so there comes a time where, um, you do have to do your what is this, like pull the card, so to speak. I've been in a lot of high ranking positions, and I've never wanted to pull my card on people or my rank. But there is a time, and there does come a time where you do need to stand your ground and to tell people who you are, what you stand for, and what you mean. So being humble is not saying in a fact of a punkish way, but being firm, it does come with it, but you don't have to be a butthole per se. So, in a lack of better words, so there does come a time where you do have to show some humbleness towards your staff. Now, having that attribute, it does take you far, and it can take you far. And being a minority and a woman, I've been in a lot of positions where I had to be firm. However, I still stayed humble, and it got me far. But that's a very good point. I have a lot of millionaire friends that I would say that I rub shoulders with, and a lot of them you don't even know that they are filthy rich, and they have set that pathway, and I think and I know that takes you a long way. Granted, it doesn't work for everyone, but I do know in my community and people I've worked with that never have to lift a finger again. They're humble, and I admire that because you don't see it a lot in the workplace. So good point.
Well, here's a story, and I'm not going to be political, but during Donald Trump's TV show, the one where he fired everyone, I had the opportunity to meet the second in command of his organization, and I asked him a question. I said, like, I can't believe everybody works for this guy. And he says, "Oh no, it's not. That's not exactly how Trump actually behaves. When he's with us, he's actually a really nice guy. But when he's on TV, he wants to show people a certain thing." I think there's this perception out there that you have to act and behave a certain way, but in reality, those that are humble, I think they do have much more productive workforces. And in fact, Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, when he studied level 5 leaders, he discovered one of their traits was humility. But really good, really enjoyed having you on stage here. And you're always welcome back on the Serial Entrepreneur. We love having other serial entrepreneurs on stage to help us crack the code, what it is that people like yourself do to launch companies over and over again to start, scale, exit, and repeat. Great. If you're in the audience again, feel free to raise your hand. We're starting to get a nice flow right now. We're starting to figure out, what are the key things we need to do to motivate people. So the heading was around culture too, of creating a productive culture. And I think setting up core values within an organization that everyone understands can actually attract, it can motivate, and it can keep people. Now, it can also be a way that you kick people out of the organization. And so we at the incubator here, working with coaches in many of our companies, have set up core pillars or core values. I'm thinking of back to our last company that we sold to GoDaddy, Jeff, Michelle, and I, and we had core values. Do you remember them, Jeff and Michelle? I know one was do crazy things, not stupid things. Recognize
Yep.
greatness. Um,
Yep. Integrity over money.
and usage is everything. There we go. And so,
What?
what? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I said integrity over money.
Yeah, and you had to act on that one at one time with
Yes,
one particular employee.
that's
I don't
correct.
know if you can share anything, and or if it's a sensitive topic.
No, but it's just that to Colin's earlier point, when you have strong core values, it also means that you should be willing to hire and fire accordingly, meaning that you want to hire people that you believe will fit within those core values and would be able to live up to them. And by the same token, if you have an employee, even if they're a great employee in other ways, who is not able to live up to those core values, you may have to lose that employee. And to Colin's point, once had an experience with the one integrity over money. There was a situation with an employee who was a great employee, performing pretty well, generating revenue for the company. but did something, and it wasn't even intentional. It was a bad mistake, but there are some mistakes that just have consequences that you can't avoid. And it was poor judgment, and it was something that lacked a move that lacked integrity and could have hurt not only that person's reputation, but the company's reputation. And the decision had to be made to let that employee go, even though they were a valued employee in terms of their performance. They had really gone against one of our core values that was more important. So sometimes you have to make that choice with your core values. The other thing with core values, which is nice that we do at paw.com, is we do a daily core value shout out. So at the huddles that Michelle was talking about earlier, we always recognize someone in the company, and it could be anyone anywhere in the company, who has done something recently to exemplify one of our core values. So we call it a core value shout out, and it's a nice way to A, recognize and acknowledge an employee who's doing a good job, and B, reinforce what our core values are, because when you give someone a core value shout out, of course, you're going to mention which core value they have exemplified in their recent actions.
Yeah, we've actually done a show on core values. And if you want to check out any show, you can go to startup.club, and search under Serial Entrepreneur Club, or you can go to your favorite podcast, because we're now on Podcast Network, and we did a show on core values, and we had Vern Harnish come on, and he's one of probably the leading people with respect to the development in this area. And he really recommends coming up with phrases that are memorable, not words, not paragraphs, not the kind of stuff you see on the, you walk into an office and you see it on the board and it's a big paragraph and no one can remember any of the core values. He likes to use phrases. And I had the opportunity to visit Zappos, and on the CFO's desk was the book, The Rockefeller Habits, which was written by um, Vern Harnish. And if you know anything about corporate culture and Zappos, pretty much they created probably one of the best corporate cultures in America and actually marketed that. It became a thing at their company. And I just thought that was really cool. And we've seen some evolution in that space, but setting up core values, having everybody understand core values, I believe it can lead to a more productive company. We have Amber on stage. Amber, any thoughts on this topic of how we motivate, keep, and attract employees?
Hi, this is my first time on the stage. Thank you for inviting me, Michelle. I saw the invite, so I couldn't help but to accept. But yes, I did mention in the chat about KPIs in the workplace, and I kind of wanted to tie that into the core values as well. I am an employee for Optum, and I work in operations, and we definitely put into play core values relating to integrity, innovation, and autonomy. And then, in addition to that, we base our performance off of KPIs and metrics. So, one thing that I found beneficial as a team is us knowing those expectations in the workplace and knowing how well we're performing, whether or not we're completing our tasks in time. Is that really adding or giving us a bonus, or just adding on to our performance and how we're contributing to the company as a whole? I like to know what kind of impact I'm having. Um, on in the company, and how am I serving the patients by doing my job. So yes, I wanted to bring that topic up of key performance indicators and us knowing exactly how we're contributing to the company as employees, and how important that is within a company to just set those firm ground rules in that area of having those indicators that show that we're actually making an impact and we're hitting those targets.
Yeah, I think that ambiguity is our enemy when it comes to motivation. Uh, you know, when we have people that we want to hire or we want to keep or we want to motivate, we're going to want to make certain that we've mutually sat down and agreed upon the goals that need to be set, and that if they achieve those goals, that we provide them with the recognition they deserve. And we need to put that in writing. Too many times I've seen people work for companies, and a startup entrepreneur will say, you know what, when things go well, I'm going to give you a part of the company, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'll give you a bonus, and it's all verbal. And verbal does not work when it comes to motivating. I truly believe that you have a much bigger impact if you really believe what you're going to say when you're trying to motivate somebody. Why not put that in writing? Why not make certain that that employee knows that if I achieve X, I will receive X amount of bonus? Ambiguity is the enemy of startups. So it's something that we have to think about as well. We're going to go popcorn style now. Anyone on stage just want to pop something out? We're rounding the final corner here. Please, if you have a new idea or another
I'll,
idea, go ahead.
I'll pop something, Colin. One thing I think that's important in building a culture too, and maybe even more important now with so many remote workers, is treat people like adults. If you're hiring people because they have a certain skill and you want them to contribute to the growth of your company, give them the responsibility and the opportunity to do that. Treat them with respect, treat them with adults. Give them, obviously, you don't want to ignore them. You want to give them KPIs and you want to track their performance, but also give them the freedom to get the job done the way they need to get it done. And if that means if they have to take an hour off because their kid fell down and scraped their knee and they got to pick them up, you don't penalize them for that as long as they're getting their work done. It shouldn't matter. And I think with people working remotely, there's some interesting studies coming out. I just heard a podcast talking about them, about the negatives of all of this tracking software that many companies have been putting on computers so that when they can tell if someone's working from home, they can monitor their work and they can see if they're touching their keyboard. And then people are buying these mouse movers on Amazon that you can buy for 15 bucks that'll move your mouse periodically to make it look like you're working, even if you're not. And there's a lot of studies coming out that this is negative, not positive, and it's actually making people less productive than more productive when they feel like Big Brother is watching their every move. So I think it's important, you're hiring adults, you're hiring them because you believe they have the skills to help your company grow. Give them the opportunity to do so. Treat them with the same kind of respect you would like to be treated with, and not like someone looking over their shoulder constantly questioning every move they make. If you have to do that, then you're probably not hiring the right people. If you're hiring the right people, you should be able to give them the freedom to get the job done. That's my opinion.
Yeah, amen to that, Jeff. I couldn't agree more about the tracking. I know it's hard for a lot of people, but a little fast story. I worked for a very big publicly traded company at the beginning of my career. They literally tracked everybody's phone calls, right? This was before everybody had their mobile phones at their desk. And I got in trouble. They're like, my boss came to me almost embarrassed, goes, "Oh my gosh, Michelle, like you talked the most on the phone on the whole team." And he's looking at me, goes, "How is this possible? You are the most productive person." And he was like, "Okay, I'm not going to say anything, like just, like keep it down because other people might know." Like, that's horrible. Like, I was like so worried. So I agree. And it leads me, I just want to mention this really quickly. I know we're kind of coming to the end here. A really big subject right now, all over the media, and everybody knows this, I'm sure, is quiet quitting. There's a great article that just came out, is free online, from Harvard Business Review. It came out on August 31st, and it's talking about how quiet quitting is about a bad boss. Like, I love this article, and it really encapsulates a lot about what has been said here. Is, how do we as bosses, right, stop or curtail quiet quitting? Of course, they went into lots of statistics, but at the top of every list for them was trust. And then how do you build that trust with the employee with your coworkers as well, I would say too, because I believe it is just as much about coworkers, especially when you work in environments like what we have, which are, pretty flat, quite actually, and everybody just has equal access. So the second part of that was consistency, being consistent with people, being consistent in your work. And then the third thing was about expertise. This is how you build trust. You're consistent and you're doing a good job. Like it's really, a read I would recommend to everyone. It's a short read. And I think in these days when, we have a lot of younger employees that are working remotely, um, don't just think they're being lazy or whatever, or we all have to come to the office with somebody standing over your shoulder. Like if you can't trust somebody, if you can't build that consistency, then I think you have a bigger problem than where they're working or who they are. So that's some final thoughts from me. Thank you for listening.
I have another one kind of going off of the last part of Michelle's. I think it's really important to create a work culture where people know it's totally okay to make mistakes and ask for help. I think that's the only way that like real work and good ideas come to be.
Yeah, and I think that's a major advantage over larger companies. Larger companies are risk averse by nature. It's just the way they evolve. But smaller companies are more, they embrace risk. Remember I talked about Club, the company that we used to own, and one of our values was do stupid things, not crazy. Do crazy things, not stupid things. It's Friday afternoon, okay? Do crazy things, not stupid things. That was one of our core values, which basically said, look, stick your neck out there. I know Jeff, when we launched the domain extension, he brought on 50 Cent to do a party in New York. We would sometimes wrap sports cars. Like we just did a lot of very interesting things at industry events and parties. And, I think people might have thought we were crazy, but, the reality is we ultimately sold to GoDaddy for a pretty high multiple. So I think in the end it paid off. But that whole concept of allowing people to fail, that's so critical in a startup and so difficult in larger companies. And that's one thing that can attract risk takers, which is what we need when you're launching a startup. We have 3 minutes left. Anyone else from the stage? Cletus.
Yeah. One thing that also boosts productivity is having non-negotiables at as a company. I watched Mikel Arteta's and Arsenal's All or Nothing, and the first thing when he came in as a manager of the club was to establish non-negotiables. And when he saw football players go against his non-negotiables, which were actually to help them grow, he had to ship them off so that they don't corrupt his workplace. So having non-negotiables are really non-negotiable values. Exactly, that's what I'm talking about. Are really really important for growth and productivity in a startup.
Yeah, and you said that's a sports team that implemented this. It was a
Yeah,
coach.
I was a coach in England, Mikel Arteta. Yeah.
I can't believe how many stories we hear from the sports community, or documentaries or Netflix shows that we watch about sports teams and how culture plays a role. And in many ways, they really are startups, or they are
Yeah,
small
yeah,
businesses. They have the same
exactly,
challenges, yet their failure is pretty visible. So they get a lot of attention, and we can learn a lot of lessons from them
exactly.
as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this has been a great show. Thank you very much, Cletus and Letitia and Amber and Mimi and Michelle and Jeff. I mean, again, what a great show. A lot of great feedback from the community and a lot of new members coming on today to share with us some of their ideas. And you know what? It's September, and we have a lot of new shows coming up. We have some guest speakers coming up, but you're not going to know about it unless you go to startup.club and sign up to our email list. And we only do the emails, I think, once a week, Michelle, unless we have a really big speaker come on. We might do a special email for that. But Generally, we do an email letting you know the highlights of Startup Club and what's going to happen this week or next week, sorry. So do sign up to that mailing list. This is an opportunity to find out what's going on at Startup Club on Clubhouse. We're trying to go for 1 million members. I know we're getting closer. If you're not a member, you can click on that greenhouse on top. But I know we were closing in on 900,000 members. I know we're the largest club on Clubhouse. And that's because of all of you. And today, again, the community coming together to take on an issue and solve a problem. So thank you very much. And we will see everyone next week on the Serial Entrepreneur Club Hour. And don't forget, we have over 70 episodes in your favorite podcast network. And if you listen to these episodes, you will get an MBA in entrepreneurship. See you next week.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone.